Several court cases going through the appellate courts right now regarding the City of Austin short-term rental ordinance. As of the filming of this video, the regulations are as follows. There are 3 types of licenses you can apply for from the City of Austin. You can apply for Type 1, Type 2, or Type 3 permits. The cost for the application is $567. That includes $517 for the actual application fee, as well as $50 for the notification fee. The $50 notification fee will be used to mail notice of your application to the neighbors within a certain distance of your home. Applying for a short-term rental permit is a uniquely miserable experience. The process is cumbersome, inconsistent, and inefficient at best. So what exactly are the differences between Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3 permits? Type 1 permits are owner-occupied, relatively simple. If you want to lease out a bedroom in your house, let's say you have a 3-bedroom house, and want to lease out one of those bedrooms during a holiday weekend, you have to get a permit. Let's say you have a guest apartment above your garage that's detached from your house, you have to get a permit. Let's say you're lucky enough to have a house with a guest house and you want to rent them both together, you have to get a permit. These will all be classified under Type 1 or owner-occupied permits. Now, the most coveted of all the permits is the Type 2 permit, or the non-owner occupied. My precious. The Type 2 permit is no longer being issued by the City of Austin. So if you are looking to buy an investment property and rent it out as an Airbnb, you cannot legally do that in the City of Austin as of right now. So this is a note to investors. If you are looking to buy an investment property that is not your primary residence in the City of Austin, you cannot do so legally. Now, COVID has devastated the local Airbnb market. I know several investors that have opted to lease their properties long-term as opposed to Airbnb in this post-COVID world. In my experience, the properties that are still very successful despite the challenges created by COVID are properties in rural communities, rural areas, spots for people to get away from the city, or properties that are large enough to have work from home space or pools. Families that are traveling as a group are still looking for these larger homes, particularly ones with pools, and those units tend to be very successful. Despite the fact that the City of Austin is no longer issuing new Type 2 permits, there are still quite a few properties that have grandfathered Type 2 permits from before the current regulations. If you're interested in all the nitty-gritty details of the most recent update to the City of Austin regulatory requirements on short-term rentals, you can look up City of Austin Code 25-2-789. I'll post a link in the comments below. There's a 3% cap in the number of licenses that the city will issue in regard to Type 2 rentals, as well as accessory dwelling units or detached Type 1 rentals. If your guest house was built after October 1st, 2015, you cannot actually use that for more than 30 days in a calendar year as a short-term rental. We're currently in a housing crisis in the City of Austin. Rents are rising dramatically, housing prices are rising dramatically, and the City of Austin saw this as a band-aid to try and limit the speculative nature of building guest houses for the intent purposes of income property. I personally disagree with the wisdom behind that decision. However, them's the rules. So, to review, you want to rent out a house, and it is your primary residence. You have to get a Type 1 rental permit. If you have a guest house, you have to get a Type 1 rental permit. If you want to build a guest house for the intent purpose of renting it out as a short-term rental, you cannot do so unless you lease it for less than 30 days a year. If you violate the City of Austin short-term rental ordinance, the city can choose to not fulfill your renewal of your license, and that can prevent you from renting in the future. So ultimately, you need to follow the rules. The frustrating part about the rule process is the inspection side of it is inconsistent. It's often complaint-driven. So neighbors can call in complaints as much as they want. If the city is able to prove violations of that ordinance and you have more than 2 in a year, the city can opt to not fulfill your license. If there are too many violations of the short-term regulatory rules, the city can opt to not renew your license and you won't be able to rent the property out short-term anymore. Some of those rules include no parties, quiet hours between 10 p.m. and 10 a.m. You're not supposed to hear any audible sound at the edge of the property between those hours. You're also limited on the number of people that can be on site on a property. Those limits include 10 family members or 6 unrelated individuals. There's also the Type 3 STR permit that the City of Austin issues. This one you won't see very often, honestly. However, this applies to all units that are more than a duplex. There are limitations on the Type 3 permits. The Type 3 permit is something that most people won't interact with. It generally deals with investment companies like the Guild that rent out dozens of units in apartment complexes and use them as short-term rentals. Of the total unit count inside those apartment complexes, no more than 25% of the apartment complex can be used for short-term rental purposes, and everyone in the building needs to be notified that a number of the units are being used as short-term rentals, and there is a process that has to be in place for neighbors to lodge complaints. Now that we've covered the type of licenses that you need in order to own and operate a short-term rental property, there are two other things that are certain in life, and that's death and taxes. I'm not here to talk about death, though we're all going to die. Two different types of taxes that you'll have to pay. In addition to your normal property taxes, the state and the city have tax requirements associated with your short-term rental. Luckily, the state of Texas was able to work a deal with short-term rental sites like HomeAway, Vrbo, Airbnb, in which they actually collect the hotel tax that is due to the state, which is 6% at the time of the guest's reservation. Unfortunately, the city of Austin, in their infinite wisdom, chose to not work a deal with Airbnb. That means that you, as the owner, have to self-report your taxes. The city of Austin has one of the highest tax rates when it comes to hotel tax in the state of Texas. We were at 9%, and now it is a whopping 11%. Some of the sites allow you to actually collect that 11% as an add-on fee when guests are booking their reservation, but it is absolutely important, if you are not collecting that from the guest up front, that you make sure that you document that tax on every single stay and document that so that you can report that every quarter. If for some reason you are still reporting the state taxes, those are due on the 20th. The city of Austin requires that you file a financial report for each short-term rental that you own and operate at the end of the month following each quarter. For example, the first quarter is between January 1st and March 31st. You will have to report your Q1 tax returns with the City of Austin Finance website at the end of April. Keep records of these payments because they will become important when you go to renew your license. The City of Austin has moved most of this online, and it makes it easier for them to document this. Early in the STR days, a lot of this was paper, and you would have to keep paper records in order to timely renew your license. If you don't timely renew your license, especially with Type 2 permits, it's a risky business because ultimately they can choose to not renew your license, and they're no longer issuing new ones. So definitely be sure to renew your license timely and pay your taxes timely. Otherwise, you will lose your license, and the City of Austin will not renew it. Other things that you'll need: certificate of occupancy. Most people have no idea how to get a certificate of occupancy. If the property is recently built, it should be provided to you by your builder at the time of closing. If you do not have a certificate of occupancy or a CO, if you do not have a certificate of occupancy, also known as a CO, you can usually get it at the Development Services Department, which is right there at the corner of Barton Springs and South 1st Street. I'll post a link for the DSD or the Development Services Department in case you need to get a copy of your certificate of occupancy. Another thing the City of Austin required is proof of insurance. Be sure and check with your insurance provider because most standard insurance policies will not cover damage under short-term rental. Most insurance companies will view this as a commercial use of the property, and you risk having a claim go unpaid. I've heard of insurance companies denying claims of the use of rental properties as short-term rentals by claiming that this is a commercial use of the property. In my experience, it's best to get a specific policy that allows for short-term rentals, and keep in mind these can be quite a bit more expensive. In my experience, it's usually 30 to 50% more expensive to get an insurance policy that specifically allows short-term rental, and usually the coverage is worse. You'll be required to provide this proof of insurance when you both apply for a permit as well as when you go to renew it. Anyways, I hope that hopefully this was a helpful video. I am a real estate agent here in Austin, Texas. If you have any questions about the market, about short-term rentals, about investment properties, construction, anything related to real estate here, I'd be glad to help. Like, follow, subscribe. I'll be posting more videos here. And please follow me on my Instagram. I'm glad to answer any DMs there as well, @AustinFromAustin_. Hope you have a great week.